I guess we can do some kind of inventory tutorial today. I wonder what type of tutorial can I do. Well, that was not so bad. Alright guys, what's up? Today we're going to be doing an inventory, and we're just going to be doing some basic movements inside inventory, have our items, have numbers on them, and basically just that. Alright, so without further ado, let's begin. Alright, so the sequence of inventory. Well, first of all, we're going to have to create an inventory, and to do that, let's just imagine boxes, and let's just imagine some arbitrary space in the world where we have 24 items and 24 slots where we can start inserting items into it. So let's just randomly insert items over here, and with our insertion, we have a few things that we can do. Now we can have like a function called swapping, where we can move things around from either an empty object, empty cell, or with two cells that have different objects. And the last function that we have is a common delete function, which just takes a slot from the cell and deletes the items inside it. All right, now that we have our basic controls, let's talk about the steps that we need to make this. First things first, we're going to have an inventory class, and what we're going to do is we are going to handle a few data types inside it. One is going to be the list of our ID and the amount that we have, and the other one's a GUI. So with that basic list, let's create a little bit of helper functions in the form of either classes or properties. So the inventory itself will have all our items that we hold that have the ID and the amount. And then what we are going to do is we are going to send and select a specific item from the inventory. So in this case, we're going to be selecting number item 1, which then goes into the database, and then we look up what item ID 1 has. So in this case, it's apple with a value of 8 and an image path. Okay, with that, then we go into the GUI, and then we ask it to calculate its thing. After calculating everything, it has a few choices, and two of them that we're going to do is, one, we are going to give the choice to the game to show it, and the other choice is a callback function which updates the inventory list. Now with that update function, we have a cyclical graph which makes sure everything goes in a cycle. Alright, it's a bit basic, but it's good enough for now. So first we're going to make a database controller, which basically has a few things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to component define it, so it becomes a component inside the world space. The next thing we're going to have is actually the init and update, which just allows these two functions to update inside world space. Init being just at the beginning, update every frame. The next thing is a property parameter, where we can allow a node or an object inside world to be connected to this class. The next thing we're going to do is have a parameter which allows us to control the property. Alright, on the CPP side, we're just going to register the component and keep the init updates empty. So with our database controller like that figured out, let's go and talk about the property. So in our property, we're going to have a struct, which is database. We can use whatever data. Currently, I'm only going to be using these three data types to just control it, and it's going to be in a list. At the same time, we're going to have a inventory data type, also a list, but the difference is one's a database, the other one's a vector2. The vector2 holds the ID and amount. Simple as we explained earlier. Alright, so now with all that out of the way, let's go and see how we do it. Now that we added the property, we're going to actually add an addition to our database controller, which allows us to actually get those names, values, and image path from the property, thus making a small modification, but now we have everything set. Let's go and check it out. So inside our game, we just create a dummy, and it's a node dummy that just holds a position in space. We're going to call it database. Now inside here, we're going to add that database controller property. So as you can see, that database node parameter, we have it right there. Now the next thing we're going to do is just create a small little dummy node child, and we're going to add that database property inside it. Now the reason why I just did it as a child, so it's easier to access it later on maybe, or it's just easier to look at. After connecting the database property to the controller, we have our database set up. The next thing we're going to do is actually make an inventory controller. Now the inventory controller handles all our inventory class, and we're going to have it almost the same as the database controller, except we're going to add two new things, the inventory maker and the inventory GUI. Maker controls the inventory while the GUI controls the user interface. For the inventory maker, we have a few functions that we're going to handle. The first of all that we are going to check is actually the constructor, which is basically a dependency injector for the parameter. Basically, it connects the parameters. That's the easiest way to say it. The next thing is a get item, which I might put in public, that gets the item, and set item puts the values inside that position. The add uses that set item, the first one being a loop through, while the second one is an exact position adder. So you add it in the exact position. It's easier. Now the next thing is a swap, where we basically swap between the item and the value that you have, and then the delete deletes the item in that position and returns you that item. Now that is the basics of how to write that inventory maker. As for the other function that we have, the inventory GUI, there's quite a lot more functions inside here, but normally all of them are helper functions. The main thing you need to know is that we only going to be publicizing three of them: the hide, the show, and the shutdown, and that's about it. Now I'm gonna go more into detail on this later, but for now, in our world, we put the inventory property back aside, and now let's actually fill it up. So we're going to fill up the database property first. Let's just add 4 items at the moment right now, and I'm going to add the first item as the empty item with a gray square piece in it, while the other ones are just going to be whatever they are. And then we forgot to give them a value. We can go back later and give them the value. It's very procedural and modular. Now as for the inventory, we're just going to add that 24 we were talking about and fill it up with random items of the same ID that we currently have in the database and certain values. Then we are going to start coding the GUI, and honestly it's a lot of things. I'm not gonna lie, I wrote too much and it got crazy, but we go back into the database controller, and the changes that we add is we add a database controller pointer so we can get the same number, with the reference number being the node's number. It's on the top right. And for the CPP class, we just add a line which allows us to get into the parameter and allows us to get those values from the property. That's easy and done. Now the last thing is, for the inventory maker, we have a lot of changes, and it's kind of a bit of a bother to go through them because the process is about the same as I said it. You can go and look through my GitHub to see the changes. It's not really that much. Each function does what it says, as long as you know the processes and the theory. Now for the GUI though, there is a difference. We're going to have a little sequence that we're going to be using. It's just going to be, we loop through all the slots, get images and text for them, add them into a list and a grid, and map them from the position to the item so we can have everything connected, and then callbacks. Now coding all this took a lot of time too, but anyways.
One eternity later.
Alright, so with the GUI, let's see. The first thing we have is a constructor which just connects the inventory pointer and creates a background. Then we have two GUIs, hide and show. The hide just takes the current UI, sees if the widgets are in there. If they are, then we remove them and we delete the grid. Now in the show, we have the same thing in reverse, where if it's not in there, we put them in there, but we also have something new. We have the create grid. Now it's a lot faster of deleting these widgets and recreating them and adding them than it is just replacing the images. So that's what we're going to do. And that's what we're going to do for every hide and show that we have. All right, that wasn't so bad, but now we go through it and then we'll see what it is later. Now shutdown does the same thing. It deletes the grid, but at the same time it also deletes the background. The background is not in the update loop or the creation grid loop. Now for the delete grid, it's not too bad. We just go through all the grid, we delete all the images, delete the list, delete the grid, clear it up, and clear up the maps and all the other lists. Create background is just a simple background creation tool where we take a canvas, we draw a polygon, which is just a rectangle, we give it a certain height, and we put it in a certain order, and we put it in the center at this point. Right now we're just doing the little math to put it at center, and it's a little black. Create grid is basically the beginning of all of our problems, but honestly it's everything in there. This is just the beginning, the initialization. We're just putting everything together. The main thing is actually that for loop that I was talking about right here, where we're taking the inventory size and then we're looping through it. The image is basically creating the image, adding it into a certain width. If it has an ID, we put a callback and we add it to list. Same thing happens with the text. There's no callbacks on text, so we just push them into the list. And the last part that we have is once we have the grid, now we put it in the center alongside the background square canvas. So that's the simple part. The last part is just your callbacks, where the hover, where it takes it, colors it green, and then leave. When you leave it, it does white. On click, I added a few extra options where we just show it on the log. You could do something else. And then for drop or drag and drop, we swap the items and then we update the hide and show. Alright, so with all that done, now we go back in here. I press Y to open it up, and as you can see, when I go over it, it's green and it's white if I leave. We can click and drag it to a certain spot. If they're the same objects, they add together, and if they are not the same objects, they are swapped. Alright, then I also did the click. As you click on the top left, you can see that database. Alright, now with all that done, I hope you liked this video, and if you want anything else or change, let me know. I'll see you guys next time.